The Zarketh Imperial fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. 40,000 warships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of the yellow star humans called the Sun. It was the largest military force assembled in 300 years, and Admiral Thexnor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching the sensor displays with satisfaction. All ships report ready status, Admiral, his second-in-command announced. The young officer's voice carried barely concealed excitement. This would be his first subjugation campaign, and the humans were supposed to be easy. Thexnor nodded slowly, his 4 eyes scanning the tactical display. The Sol system spread before him like a primitive garden, undefended and ripe for the taking. A few hundred human vessels orbited the third planet, their technology laughably outdated. No proper shields, no quantum drives, no dimensional weapons. They were barely space-capable, really. Begin standard blockade formation, Thexnor ordered. Establish the sphere. Nothing enters or leaves this system. The fleet moved with practiced precision, 40,000 ships spreading across billions of kilometers, forming a perfect sphere around the entire solar system. It would take them 6 hours to reach their positions, but once complete, the blockade would be absolute. The Imperium had done this thousands of times before. Thexnor settled into his command chair, his clawed hands resting on the armrests. He had personally overseen the subjugation of 200 species during his 4-century military career. The pattern was always the same. Show overwhelming force. Deliver the ultimatum. Wait for the inevitable surrender. Humans would be no different. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld, the communications officer reported. On screen, a human face appeared on the main display, male judging by the anatomy databases, middle-aged by their short-lived standards. His face was worn, tired, with deep lines around his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept properly in days. I am Director James Mwangi of the United Earth Defense Council, the human said. His voice was steady despite the obvious strain. On behalf of all humanity, I'm asking you to leave this system immediately. You don't understand what you're doing here. We are not your enemy. We're your shield. Several officers on the bridge clicked their mandibles in amusement. Shield? These primitives? Thexnor leaned forward. I am Admiral Thexnor of the Zarketh Imperium. Your species has violated galactic law by refusing all contact protocols, ignoring trade agreements, and breaching the sacred isolation zones at the edge of your system. You will submit to Imperial authority and accept the terms of integration, or you will face extinction. You have 24 Earth hours to respond. The human director closed his eyes briefly as if in pain. Admiral, please listen carefully. The isolation zones exist for a reason that has nothing to do with trade or politics. We've been trying to keep you away for your own safety. There is something in this system that cannot be disturbed, something that your ancestors knew about even if you've forgotten. Forgotten? Thexnor's voice carried sharp amusement. The Zarketh Imperium forgets nothing. We are 3,000 years of unbroken records, human. Your species was living in caves when we were crossing galaxies. Then check your archives, Mwangi said urgently. Look for records from 4,000 years ago. Sol system. Quarantine notation. It should be there. Thexnor gestured to his intelligence officer who began accessing the historical databases. It would take time to search records that old. Most of it was considered ancient history, barely relevant to modern operations. While we wait, Thexnor continued, perhaps you should understand your situation. We are 40,000 ships. You have fewer than 300. Our weapons can shatter planets. Yours can barely scratch our hulls. This is not a negotiation. It is a statement of reality. I understand our situation perfectly, Admiral, Mwangi replied. What you don't understand is yours. You think you're here to conquer Earth, but what you've actually done is ring the dinner bell for something that has been sleeping, something we've kept contained for 10,000 years. 10,000 years? Thexnor couldn't hide his skepticism. Your species barely has written records going back 5,000 years. Written records, yes, Mwangi said. But our true history goes back much further. Everything you know about human civilization is a cover story, a necessary deception. We've been here much longer than your anthropologists believe, Admiral, and we've been here for a purpose. The intelligence officer looked up from his console. Sir, there is a notation, filed 4,247 years ago. Sol system is flagged as a quarantine zone with a threat assessment of... He paused, confusion crossing his features. The threat data appears to be corrupted, sir. But there's a recommendation. Total avoidance, the bridge fell silent. Thexnor stared at his officer. Total avoidance? That classification is reserved for stellar phenomena, black holes, dimensional tiers, not inhabited systems. The notation is clear, sir, but there's no explanation attached. Just the classification code and the recommendation. Thexnor turned back to the display where Mwangi waited. An ancient clerical error means nothing. Perhaps your system was once near a dangerous phenomenon that has since moved or dissipated. It does not change your situation. It wasn't an error, Mwangi said quietly. Your ancestors knew exactly what they were doing when they marked this system as forbidden. They just didn't tell the rest of the galaxy why, because the truth would have caused mass panic. Enough of this, Thexnor snapped. I grow tired of your stalling tactics and fairy tales. You will surrender, or I will demonstrate what happens to species that defy the Imperium. Mwangi's expression hardened. Then you force my hand, Admiral. I wanted to avoid this. But you need to understand what you're dealing with. Please scan the far side of Earth's moon. Coordinates are being transmitted now. Thexnor nodded to his sensor officer, who adjusted the deep space scanners to focus on the lunar far side. The readings came back and the officer's face paled to an unhealthy shade. Sir, there's a structure there. Massive. It extends at least 15 kilometers down into the lunar crust. Power readings they're beyond anything in our databases. The energy signature doesn't match any known technology. Show me. The tactical display shifted, revealing the structure. It was enormous. A complex of towers and installations that covered hundreds of square kilometers. The architecture was wrong somehow. Angles that seemed to shift when viewed from different perspectives. Materials that the sensors couldn't properly identify. That's not human construction, the intelligence officer whispered. No, it's not, Mwangi confirmed from the screen. We found it 10,000 years ago, already operational. It's a prison, Admiral, and we've been its guards ever since. Thexnor studied the structure, his tactical mind analyzing what he was seeing. A prison for what? For something that almost destroyed the galaxy once before, Mwangi said. The progenitors built it. You know about them, don't you? The ancient ones. The precursor civilization that supposedly vanished. Every spacefaring species knew the legends of the progenitors. Ruins of their civilization dotted the galaxy. Remnants of a people so advanced that modern science could barely understand their technology. They had disappeared roughly 50,000 years ago, leaving no explanation. The progenitors are a myth, Thexnor said, but his voice lacked conviction. The progenitors were real, Mwangi countered. And they didn't vanish. They fled. They fled from what they created. From weapons that turned against them. The facility on our moon is one of 7 prisons they built across the galaxy to contain those weapons. We call them the Devourers because that's what they do. They consume energy, matter, space, time, everything. Preposterous, Thexnor began, but Mwangi cut him off. Then explain the structure, Admiral. Explain technology that predates every known civilization. Explain why your own ancestors marked this system as forbidden. Explain why the progenitor ruins across the galaxy all show signs of the same catastrophic war. Thexnor had no answer. The ruins were real. The warnings were real. The ancient quarantine notation was real. Even if any of this were true, he said slowly, why should I believe that you've been guarding this supposed prison for 10,000 years? Your civilization is barely past its industrial age. Because we've been lying to ourselves, Mwangi said bluntly. We've deliberately limited our own development. Do you think it's an accident that humanity never developed faster than light travel, despite having nuclear weapons and quantum computers? Do you think it's chance that we never expanded beyond our own planet's moon? We've been holding ourselves back, Admiral, sacrificing our potential to keep the rest of the galaxy safe. You expect me to believe that your entire civilization has been a front for some secret warden organization? Yes, Mwangi said simply. Every major civilization on Earth, Egypt, Babylon, Rome, all of them. They were covers, Admiral. Fronts to maintain the appearance of natural development while our real work happened in secret. Thousands of us have lived and died in that facility, maintaining technology we barely understand, keeping the seals intact, praying that we'd never be discovered. Thexnor was about to respond when alarms shrieked across the bridge. His sensor officer's voice rose in panic. Sir, energy spike from the lunar facility. Multiple human vessels are converging on that location. They're broadcasting an emergency signal on all frequencies. What's the signal? It's in Old Galactic, sir. Multiple dialects. It says Warden Protocol compromised. Seal breach imminent. Evacuate sector. Old Galactic. The common trade language from 4,000 years ago. How did humans have access to those linguistic databases? On the screen, Mwangi's face had gone white. What did you do? Tell me your Vanguard ships didn't approach the lunar facility. Thexanor pulled up the Vanguard logs. 3 ships had performed a standard scan of the moon 20 minutes ago. They had detected what they thought were weapons platforms and had neutralized them according to standard protocol. Minor defensive installations were eliminated, Thexanor admitted. Mwangi's expression collapsed into something between horror and resignation. Those weren't defensive installations, you fool. They were part of the containment field. The prison required constant power. You just damaged the grid. Sir, the sensor officer's voice was shaking now. The readings from the lunar facility are increasing exponentially. Something is happening inside the structure. The dimensional readings are... Sir, they don't make sense. It's like space itself is folding. Thexanor watched the sensor displays with growing unease. Energy patterns that violated known physics, spatial distortions that shouldn't exist. And at the center of it all, the ancient progenitor facility, its strange towers beginning to glow with an otherworldly light. All ships combat alert, he ordered. Deploy all defensive screens. Weapons to ready status. Admiral, please, Mwangi pleaded from the screen. Pull your ships back from the moon. Stop feeding it energy. Everything you do makes it worse. Makes what worse? As if in answer, the first seal broke. The sensors registered it first. A tear in space itself, originating from deep within the lunar facility. Not a tear into normal space, but into somewhere else. Somewhere that the ship's computers couldn't properly map because the dimensions were wrong. Something emerged. The bridge crew fell silent as they watched the sensor displays trying and failing to categorize what they were seeing. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a creature. It was a presence. A distortion. Something that existed partially in their reality and partially in places that physics said couldn't exist. Where it moved, stars in the background bent. Space seemed to recoil from its touch. And it was moving toward the nearest Imperial ships. All batteries open fire, Thexanor commanded. 1,000 weapons discharged. Plasma bolts, antimatter missiles, particle beams. Enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. The weapons struck the entity, and for a moment Thexanor thought they had destroyed it. Then the sensors updated. The entity was larger. It had absorbed the energy. "Ceasefire!" he shouted, but it was too late. The entity reached the first battle group. 300 ships all opening fire with everything they had. The entity flowed through them like water through sand. Ships didn't explode. They didn't burn. They simply ceased to exist, edited out of reality as if they had never been there at all. 15,000 crew members. Gone in seconds. On the screen, Mwangi was shouting, his composure finally broken. "Stop shooting. You're feeding it. Energy makes it stronger. Every shot you fire gives it more power." Thexanor stared at the tactical display in horror. A second seal had broken. A third entity was emerging. The first one was already moving through his fleet, erasing ships with every touch. "All ships retreat to outer perimeter," he ordered. "Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage," but the damage was done. The entities were loose and they were hungry. The galaxy's nightmare had awakened, and an overconfident armada had been the ones to ring the bell. Mwangi's face filled the screen one last time, exhausted and defeated. "We held the line for 10,000 years, Admiral. You broke it in 20 minutes. May your gods have mercy on us all, because what's coming won't." The transmission ended, leaving Thexanor alone with the consequences of his arrogance, watching ancient horrors feast on his fleet. The Imperial fleet scattered like frightened fish before a predator. Ships broke formation, desperately fleeing toward the outer system while the entities pursued them with terrifying speed. Thexanor watched helplessly as his carefully organized blockade dissolved into chaos. "Damage report," he demanded, gripping his command chair so hard his claws left marks in the metal. 700 ships lost. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, voice shaking. "Another 200 reporting critical damage. The entities appear to be accelerating. They're moving faster than our sensors can track." On the main display, the 3 entities appeared as dark spots in space, like holes torn in reality itself. Around each one, space bent and twisted in ways that made Thexanor's eyes hurt to watch. They moved through his fleet without following normal physics, appearing in one location and then another with no apparent transition between. "Sir, the entities are emitting some kind of signal," the communications officer announced. "It's not electromagnetic. It's propagating through subspace. Our long-range sensors are detecting responses from across the galaxy. Responses? From what? Unknown, sir. But there are 6 other locations showing similar energy signatures. All of them are activating. 6 other prisons, just as the human had said. 7 in total across the galaxy. Thexnor pulled up a galactic map, marking the 6 responding locations. His blood ran cold when he recognized 2 of them. One was in the Andromeda cluster, home to 300 inhabited systems. Another was less than 50 light-years from the Imperial core worlds. "Get me Imperial Command," he ordered. "Priority Alpha. They need to know what's happening here." While he waited for the connection, Thexnor studied the tactical situation. The entities weren't pursuing his ships randomly. They were hunting methodically, selecting targets with clear intelligence. And worse, they were learning. The first entity had been slow, almost clumsy in its movements. By the time the third emerged, it moved with predatory grace. "Admiral," his sensor officer called out, "the human ships are moving." "They're not fleeing. They're converging on the lunar facility." Thexnor zoomed the tactical display. The human vessels, all of them, were abandoning their defensive positions around Earth and heading toward the moon. Not to attack, to defend. Every single human ship was taking up position around the ancient progenitor structure. "What are they doing?" he muttered. The answer came from an unexpected source. A small human vessel broke from the formation and approached his flagship. It was broadcasting a request to dock. Thexnor almost refused, but something made him accept. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the desperate hope that the humans actually knew how to stop these things. 5 minutes later, a human woman in a worn military uniform stood on his bridge. She was young, with dark skin and eyes that had seen too much. Her uniform bore no rank insignia, but the way she carried herself spoke of authority. "I'm Captain Amara Okafor," she said without preamble. "Nigerian Space Defense Force Warden Division. I need to speak with you immediately." "Warden Division?" Thexnor studied her. "You're part of this secret organization Director Mwangi mentioned?" "I am. And we don't have time for lengthy explanations." She gestured to the tactical display showing the entities ravaging his fleet. "Those are devourers. Weapons created by the progenitors in an ancient war. They were designed to consume enemy resources. Energy, matter, entire planets. But the progenitors lost control of them. The devourers didn't stop with enemy resources. They consumed everything. How do we stop them?" "You can't," Amara said bluntly. "Your conventional weapons are useless. Worse than useless. Every shot you fire feeds them. Makes them stronger. The only thing that can contain them is progenitor technology. And that facility on the moon is the only source of it in this system." "Then use it. Stop these creatures." Amara's expression was grim. "We're trying. But your attack damaged the containment grid. 3 seals broke before we could compensate. There are 7 seals total in that facility. 7 devourers. If all of them break free—" She didn't finish the sentence. Thexnor understood. If 3 entities could destroy his fleet, 7 would be unstoppable. "What do you need from me?" "Pull your ships back. Stop engaging. The devourers are feeding on your weapons fire. Every ship that attacks them makes them grow stronger." Amara moved to the tactical console, her fingers working with surprising familiarity on the alien interface. "Here, this perimeter. Nothing comes closer than this. Let us handle the containment." "Handle it how?" Amara hesitated, and Thexnor saw something like pain cross her face. "There's a reason we've guarded this facility for 10,000 years, Admiral. A reason we've sacrificed our entire civilization's potential. The progenitor weapons can contain the devourers, but they come with a cost. A cost no one should have to pay." Before Thexnor could ask what she meant, alarms shrieked again. Another seal had broken. A 4th entity emerged from the lunar facility. "No," Amara whispered. "Not yet. We're not ready." She pulled a small communication device from her uniform and spoke rapidly in a language Thexnor didn't recognize. Old Galactic, he realized. She was speaking the ancient trade tongue fluently. On the lunar surface, something was happening. The progenitor facility began to glow brighter, its strange towers pulsing with energy. Human ships moved into formation around it, creating a protective sphere. And from within the facility, something else emerged. Not another devourer. This was different, smaller, controlled. It was a weapon. The sensor officer gasped. "Sir, that energy signature. It's similar to the entities, but inverted somehow." Like a mirror image. That's exactly what it is, Amara said. The progenitors learned that you can't fight the devourers in normal space. They exist partially outside our reality. The only way to contain them is to use weapons that operate in the same dimensions they do. The weapon fired, not with light or particles or any conventional energy. It fired with something the sensors couldn't properly measure. Reality itself seemed to crystallize around the nearest devourer, space locking into fixed dimensions. The devourer writhed, and Thexner heard something through his ship's hull. Not a sound exactly, more like a vibration that bypassed his ears and went straight to his brain. It was the scream of something that shouldn't be able to make noise, transmitted through dimensions that shouldn't exist. The crystallized space collapsed. The devourer disappeared, pulled back into whatever impossible realm it had come from. 1 down, 3 to go, but something was wrong. Thexnor could see it in Amara's face. She was sweating, her hands gripping the console until her knuckles turned white. "What's happening to you?" he asked. "The weapon requires an operator," she said through gritted teeth. "Someone has to guide it, target it. But to do that, you have to link your consciousness to it. You have to partially exist in the same space the devourers do." She looked up at him and Thexnor recoiled. Her eyes had changed. They were darker now, filled with depths that shouldn't exist in normal space. You have to become like them just a little bit, and you can never come all the way back. "You're telling me that using these weapons costs your humanity? Not just humanity, sanity, identity, everything that makes you what you are. The progenitors tried to fight the devourers this way. It worked, but the cost broke their civilization. The operators became more devourer than person. They had to be locked away just like the weapons they were fighting." Thexnor stared at her in horror. "And you've been paying this price for 10,000 years? "Someone had to," Amara said simply. The progenitors fled. They abandoned the galaxy to save themselves. But they left their facilities behind still operational. My ancestors found this one. They understood what it meant, what it would cost. And they chose to pay the price anyway so that the rest of the galaxy wouldn't have to. A second weapon fired from the lunar facility. Another devourer was pulled back, crystallized space forcing it into dimensions it couldn't escape from. But Thexnor could see more human operators on his sensors now, their life signs changing, becoming something other than human. "How many people have you sacrificed?" he asked quietly. "Thousands over the millennia," Amara replied. "Every generation produces new wardens. We train them in secret, prepare them for the possibility that they might have to use the weapons. Most never do. They live their whole lives guarding the facility, maintaining the seals, hoping they'll never be needed. But some," she gestured to the lunar surface, "some become what I'm becoming. We touch the void and the void touches back." The third devourer was contained. Then the fourth. Human operators across the lunar facility were wielding the progenitor weapons with desperate precision, paying the terrible cost with each use. The entities were being forced back, pushed toward the prison from which they had emerged. Thexnor's communications officer looked up. "Sir, message from Imperial Command. They want a full report on the situation." "Tell them," Thexnor said slowly, watching the humans sacrifice themselves one by one. "Tell them that we have made a terrible mistake. Tell them that we attacked a species that has been protecting the galaxy for 10,000 years. Tell them that we owe humanity a debt we can never repay." Amara managed a weak smile. "Just tell them to check their own ancient facilities, the other 6 prisons across the galaxy. If they're showing signs of activation, they'll need help. They'll need wardens, and they'll need them fast. The Imperium will help," Thexnor promised. "We'll send ships to every location. We'll support your wardens however we can." "It won't be enough," Amara said. Her voice was changing now, taking on harmonic overtones that made Thexnor's head ache. "The signal the devourers sent. It's reaching the other prisons. They're waking up. And there aren't enough wardens at those locations. Most of them have been abandoned for centuries. Earth was the only facility still fully operational." "Then what do we do?" Amara turned to face him fully, and Thexnor saw that her transformation was accelerating. Her form seemed to flicker, existing partially in other spaces. When she spoke, her voice came from multiple locations at once. "You prepare for war, Admiral. Not against enemies you can see, but against the things that hide between dimensions. You evacuate the populations near the other facilities. You study the progenitor technology as fast as you can. And you pray that someone somewhere can find a way to seal the prisons permanently before all 7 break completely. A 5th devourer had been pushed back. A 6th. The human wardens were winning the battle in Sol system, but the cost was devastating. Thexnor could see it on his sensors. Life signs changing. Human consciousness fragmenting and reforming into patterns that barely registered as sentient. The 7th seal is holding, Amara reported. For now. We've contained the breach. But it's temporary, Admiral. The damage your ships did to the grid weakened the entire structure. The seals can't hold forever. Maybe a few years. Maybe less. What happens then? Then we fight the real war, Amara said. The same war the progenitors lost 50,000 years ago. And we hope that we're smarter or luckier or more desperate than they were. She turned to leave, her form flickering with each step. At the door, she paused and looked back. Her eyes were completely black now, filled with swirling darkness that contained entire dimensions. Thank you for pulling your ships back, Admiral, she said. It gave us the time we needed. But understand this, the galaxy just woke up from a long sleep. It remembered that there are worse things than war, worse things than conquest. There are things that want to eat reality itself, and humanity has been standing between you and those things for 10,000 years, asking for nothing in return. Why? Thexnor asked. Why would your species do this? Amara smiled, and it was the saddest thing Thexnor had ever seen. Because someone had to. Because the progenitors were cowards who fled. Because we found the facility and understood what it meant. And we decided that no one else should have to know this horror exists. We chose the burden, Admiral. We chose to stand in the dark so the rest of you could live in the light. She left, her form dissolving into shadows as she walked down the corridor. Thexnor stood on his bridge, surrounded by his crew, and felt shame deeper than anything he had experienced in 4 centuries of life. He had come to Sol system to subjugate primitives. Instead, he had found heroes, guardians who had sacrificed everything to protect a galaxy that didn't even know they existed, and he had nearly destroyed them all with his arrogance. The tactical display showed the Sol system beginning to stabilize. The Devourers were contained, pushed back into their prison. The human ships were pulling back, their wardens exhausted and transformed. The immediate crisis was over. But across the galaxy, 6 other facilities were awakening, 6 other prisons were beginning to fail, and humanity couldn't be everywhere at once. Thexnor made his decision. Open a channel to all Imperial ships. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what it costs. We will help humanity guard these prisons. We will support the wardens. We will stand alongside them and pay whatever price is necessary. He looked at the lunar facility on his display, at the strange progenitor structure that had guarded the galaxy for 50,000 years. We owe them that much. We owe them everything. Everything, Thexnor finished. Yes, Captain Okafor explained. She showed me her transformation. I watched your wardens pay the price during the containment battle. He straightened. Humanity has carried this burden alone for 10,000 years. You've sacrificed your civilization's potential, your expansion into the stars, your very identity, all to protect species you never met. It's time the rest of the galaxy shared that burden. The weapons might not work for non-humans, Sarah said. They were designed by the progenitors. We don't know if other species can interface with them. Then let us try, Thexnor replied. I have 500 volunteers from my fleet, soldiers who understand what they're offering. Let us prove that the Imperium can learn from its mistakes. Similar offers came from dozens of other species. The Valorians, an aquatic civilization known for their mathematical genius. The Kretok, a warrior culture that valued honor above all. The Silicates, crystalline beings who existed partially in energy states and thought they might have an advantage interfacing with dimensional technology. Within 2 days, Sarah had 10,000 volunteers. Humans and aliens, all willing to become operators, all willing to touch the void. She organized them into 7 teams, 1 for each prison facility. Each team received a crash course in progenitor technology, taught by the few wardens who truly understood it. They learned about the dimensional mechanics, the consciousness interface, the terrible cost of linking with weapons that operated outside normal space. Sarah took personal command of the Andromeda team. 200 wardens and 300 alien volunteers, traveling via Imperial fast ship toward the prison facility in the heart of the cluster. The journey would take 3 days at maximum speed. She spent those days preparing her people for what was coming. On the second day, She received a message from the Andromeda facility. The automated systems that had maintained the prison for millennia were failing. The first seal had broken. 2 devourers were loose in the facility, contained only by emergency fields that wouldn't last much longer. Sarah gathered her team in the ship's main cargo bay, humans and Zarketh and Valorians and others, all looking at her with a mixture of fear and determination. "I won't lie to you," she said. "What we're about to do is harder than anything you've ever experienced. The weapons require you to partially exist in the same dimensions as the devourers. You'll feel what they feel. Their hunger, their rage, their complete alien nature, and you can never fully come back. Part of you will always remain in that space between spaces." She paused, looking at each face in turn. "But if we don't do this, if we let the Andromeda facility fall, millions will die. Entire systems will be consumed. The devourers will spread like a plague across the cluster, and there won't be enough wardens in the galaxy to stop them." A Zarketh officer raised his hand. His name was Vexnal, and he was young for his species, barely a century old. "Commander, what happens to us after? Assuming we survive, assuming we seal the prison, can we ever return to normal?" Sarah considered lying, considered giving them hope. But they deserved the truth. "No," she said simply. "The transformation is permanent. You'll exist partially outside normal reality forever. Most operators end up living near the facilities, helping maintain them because it's the only place where being what they've become doesn't feel wrong. You'll never completely fit in the normal world again." Vexnal nodded slowly. "I understand. Thank you for your honesty." Another volunteer spoke up, a human woman named Dr. Lisa Park, a physicist who had been a warden analyst before volunteering for operator duty. "Will we still be ourselves? Will we remember who we were?" "Yes and no," Sarah replied. "Your memories will remain. Your core personality will remain. But you'll have experiences and perceptions that your original self never could have imagined. You'll understand things about reality that most beings aren't meant to know. Some operators say it drives them mad. Others say it's a kind of enlightenment. Most say it's both." She could see the fear in their eyes. Good. Fear meant they understood what they were facing. Fear meant they were taking this seriously. "If anyone wants to back out, now is the time," Sarah said. "No shame. No judgment. This is a volunteer mission. Always was. Always will be." No one moved. Not a single person left the cargo bay. Sarah felt pride and sorrow in equal measure. Pride that so many were willing to sacrifice everything. Sorrow that such sacrifice was necessary. "Then we prepare," she said. "When we reach the Andromeda facility, we move fast. The devourers are already loose. We need to contain them before they escape the facility entirely. That means immediate weapon activation, immediate interface. Some of us won't survive the initial connection. The weapons are powerful, and linking consciousness with them can be fatal if you're not ready." She pulled up a holographic display showing the progenitor facility. It was similar to the one on Earth's moon, but smaller. 7 towers arranged in a circle, each one housing a weapon. Each weapon capable of operating in the impossible dimensions where the devourers existed. "We'll split into 7 teams," Sarah continued. 1 for each weapon. I'll take Tower 1. Vexnal, you have Tower 2. Dr. Park, Tower 3. She continued assigning positions, spreading her most experienced wardens across the teams while mixing in the alien volunteers. "Remember," she said when she finished, "we're not trying to destroy the devourers. We can't. They're too powerful for that. We're trying to contain them, push them back into the prison, reseal them, buy the galaxy more time to find a permanent solution." "Is there a permanent solution?" someone asked. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't have an answer. The progenitors hadn't found one. They had only managed to imprison the devourers, not destroy them. And even that had cost them their entire civilization. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Andromeda facility's system. Immediately, alarms blared. The sensors were detecting massive spatial distortions around the ancient progenitor structure. On the view screen, Sarah could see it. The facility was larger than Earth's moon, a massive complex of impossible architecture floating in space. And around it, reality was breaking. 2 dark spots, 2 devourers, were moving through the structure's defensive fields, consuming everything they touched. "All teams prepare for immediate deployment," Sarah ordered. "We go in hot. No time for reconnaissance. No time for caution. We hit the weapons, we link, and we fight." The ship moved closer, and Sarah felt something change in the air around her, a pressure that built with every kilometer they closed. The Devourers were aware of them, hungry for them. She looked at her team, at the volunteers who had given up everything to be here, and felt a fierce determination. "For the galaxy," she said quietly. "For the galaxy," they echoed, and together, they descended toward the ancient prison, toward the weapons that would transform them, toward a battle that would cost them everything they were. But they went willingly, because someone had to, because the progenitors had fled and humanity had chosen to stay. And now finally they wouldn't be standing alone. The Andromeda facility was dying. Sarah could see it from the transport as they approached. The ancient progenitor structure, which had stood for 50,000 years, was coming apart at the seams. Towers cracked and crumbled. Energy fields flickered and failed. And in the heart of it all, two Devourers fed on the chaos, growing stronger with every passing moment. "Teams 1 through 7, deploy now," Sarah commanded. "Tower assignments as briefed. Move fast. We don't have time for mistakes." The transport split open, launching 7 smaller craft toward the facility. Sarah's team headed for Tower 1, the largest of the weapons platforms. Through the viewport, she could see the Devourer closest to their target. It looked like a tear in space, a wound in reality that bled darkness into the universe. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot announced. His voice was steady despite the fact they were flying straight toward something that shouldn't exist. Sarah checked her team. 25 humans and 15 Zarkath, all looking at her with expressions ranging from determination to barely controlled terror. She understood. Her own heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Listen to me," she said. "When we reach the weapon platform, the interface will activate automatically. You'll feel it trying to connect with your mind. Don't fight it, let it in. Yes, it will hurt. Yes, it will change you, but fighting it will kill you. Understand?" Nods all around. Someone whispered a prayer in a language Sarah didn't recognize. She didn't blame them. The craft landed hard on Tower 1's platform. The airlock cycled open, and Sarah led her team into the structure. The interior was wrong in ways that hurt to perceive. Walls that seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be possible. Corridors that stretched into infinity, while also being only meters long. Progenitor architecture, designed by minds that understood reality differently than any modern species. They found the weapon chamber at the tower's heart. It was a circular room dominated by 7 crystalline pillars arranged around a central platform. Each pillar pulsed with light that wasn't quite light, existing in colors that human eyes weren't designed to see. 7 operator positions, Sarah said. 7 people link at once for maximum power. The rest of you stand by for rotation. When an operator burns out, you replace them immediately. She stepped onto the central platform. 6 team members joined her, surrounding the circle. Sarah placed her hand on the nearest pillar, and the weapon recognized her. The connection hit like lightning. Sarah screamed. She couldn't help it. Her consciousness was suddenly ripped from her body and thrust into spaces that shouldn't exist. She felt herself stretching, expanding, existing in dimensions her mind had no framework to comprehend. For a terrifying moment, she thought she would simply dissolve. Her identity scattered across infinite realities. Then training kicked in. Years of preparation, meditation, mental conditioning. She grabbed hold of herself, of the core of who Sarah Chen was, and held on with everything she had. The weapon showed her what it could do, how it could reach into the dimensions where the Devourers lived, how it could crystallize space, lock reality into fixed parameters, push the entities back where they belonged. But it required a guide, a consciousness that could exist in both normal space and the dimensional void. An operator willing to touch the same darkness that gave the Devourers form. Sarah opened herself to it. Felt the weapon merge with her mind, felt herself becoming something more and something less than human. And through it all, she could feel the Devourer, its hunger, its rage, its ancient alien intelligence that saw the universe as nothing but food to be consumed. It knew she was there. It was aware of her. And it was coming. Weapon online. Sarah heard herself say, though her voice sounded wrong now, layered with harmonics that came from other dimensions. All operators, link confirmed. Targeting the nearest entity. Through the weapon's senses, she could see the Devourer approaching Tower 1. It moved through the facility's walls like they weren't there, existing partially in normal space and partially in realms beyond. Ships from the support fleet were firing at it, and Sarah wanted to scream at them to stop. Every shot fed it, made it larger, stronger. But she had no time to warn them. The weapon was ready. She was ready. "Fire!" she commanded. Reality crystallized. Sarah felt it happening through multiple levels of perception at once. Normal space locked into fixed dimensions. The laws of physics became rigid, immutable. And the devourer, which relied on dimensional fluidity to exist, was suddenly trapped. It fought. Oh, how it fought! Sarah felt its resistance, its fury, transmitted directly into her merged consciousness. It pushed against the crystallized space, trying to break free. And she pushed back, using the weapon, using her own will, forcing it to retreat. The battle lasted seconds that felt like hours. Sarah was aware of her team members screaming as they experienced the same connection she did. One of them, a young Zarketh named Plextor, collapsed as his mind couldn't handle the strain. Another operator immediately took his place. The devourer was weakening. Sarah could feel it. The crystallized space was working, forcing the entity back toward the central prison chamber. Just a little more. Just a little further. Then the weapon overloaded. The feedback hit Sarah like a physical blow. She was thrown from the platform. Her connection to the weapon severed instantly. She lay on the floor, gasping, trying to remember how to exist in only 3 dimensions after experiencing so many more. "Status," she managed to croak. "First entity contained," one of her team reported. The woman's voice had changed too, taking on the same layered quality as Sarah's. "Pushed back into the primary containment field. Temporary seal holding. Temporary." The weapon burned out 3 of its dimensional emitters. "We can't sustain prolonged use. Maybe 3 more firings before total failure." Sarah pulled herself to her feet. Her body felt wrong. Too solid. Too limited. She could still feel the echoes of existing in higher dimensions. And returning to normal space was like being crushed into a too small box. 3 shots, she muttered. 1 entity down, 1 to go. Plus sealing the breach they came through. She did the math. They'd burned through their margin with nothing to spare. Reports came in from the other towers. Tower 2 had successfully activated their weapon. Vexnel's team was engaging the second devourer. Tower 3 reported problems. Their weapon wasn't responding properly, something in the ancient systems failing after millennia of disuse. "Tower 3, this is command," Sarah transmitted.
"What's your status?"
Dr. Park's voice came back, distorted and strange. "The weapon interface is rejecting connections. We've had 4 operators try to link. All 4 burned out immediately. Something's wrong with the dimensional stabilizers," Sarah cursed. 3 towers, 7 devourers to contain plus sealing the breach. And now one of their weapons was malfunctioning. Can you repair it? Maybe, but it will take time we don't have. Through the facility sensors, Sarah could see the second devourer wreaking havoc near Tower 5. Vexnel's weapon was firing, but the entity was adapting, learning. It had seen Tower 1's crystallization attack and was finding ways to resist it. "All towers, adjust frequency," Sarah transmitted. "The devourers learn fast. Don't give them time to adapt. Hit hard, hit fast. Force them back before they figure out countermeasures." But even as she spoke, she knew it wasn't enough. The entities were too strong. The weapons were too old, too damaged. They were holding the line barely, but it wouldn't last. A new signal came through. Not from the towers. From the facility's central core. An automated message in Old Galactic repeating over and over. "Secondary containment failure. Seals 3 and 4 compromised. Additional entities emerging." "No," Sarah whispered. "Not yet. We're not ready." But the facility's sensors didn't lie. 2 more devourers were breaking free from the primary containment chamber. 4 entities total now. And they had maybe 3 functional weapons. Sarah made a decision. "Tower 3, abandon weapon repair. All operators evacuate to Tower 1. We'll consolidate our forces. Use the weapons that work, rather than waste time on the broken one." "Commander," Vexnel transmitted from Tower 2. "The entities are coordinating. They're not attacking randomly anymore. They're testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses." Of course they were. The devourers weren't mindless. They were weapons, yes, but weapons designed by the progenitors. They had intelligence, strategy, and they were starting to remember how to fight. "All towers, defensive formation," Sarah ordered. "Rotate fire patterns. Don't let them predict our attacks. And for the love of everything, tell the support fleet to stop shooting. They're just feeding these things." The battle evolved into a desperate dance. Weapons firing from different towers, crystallizing space around the devourers, forcing them back inch by inch. Operators burning out and being replaced. the facility crumbling around them as the entity's presence destabilized its ancient structure. Sarah linked with the weapon again, ignoring the pain as her consciousness was thrust back into dimensional spaces her mind wasn't meant to perceive. She targeted the nearest devourer, felt its hatred directed at her personally, and fired. Reality locked. The entity screamed across frequencies no normal being could hear, but it adapted faster this time. Within seconds, it was pushing against the crystallization, finding gaps, exploiting weaknesses. Sarah held on, poured everything she had into maintaining the lock. Her nose started bleeding. Her vision blurred. Somewhere in the normal world, she knew her body was convulsing. The team members were probably trying to pull her away from the weapon, but she held on. The devourer retreated back into the containment chamber. "Seal it," Sarah shouted. "Someone seal the breach while it's contained." Vexnel's voice came through, calm despite the impossible strain. "Tower 2 team moving to seal position. We'll use the weapon to fuse the dimensional breach. It's going to use everything we have left." "Do it!" Through her weapon-enhanced senses, Sarah watched as Tower 2's weapon fired at the breach itself, not at an entity, but at the tear in space through which they were emerging. The weapon's power crystallized the dimensional wound, forcing it closed. The breach sealed. The Devourer's connection to their prison dimension was cut off. The 4 entities that were loose remained loose, but no more could emerge. "Breach sealed," Vexnel reported. Then more quietly, "Tower 2 weapon offline. Complete burnout. We're done here." That left 2 functional weapons, and 4 Devourers to contain. Sarah disengaged from the weapon, her mind reeling. They'd stopped the immediate crisis, but they hadn't won. Not by a long shot. "Status report," she demanded. "All towers, all teams." "What do we have left?" The reports came in. Tower 1 still functional, barely. Tower 2 dead. Tower 3 never worked. Towers 4 through 7 reporting various states of damage. Only one other weapon besides hers was still operational. And the 4 Devourers were regrouping, learning, preparing for their next assault. "Commander," Dr. Park transmitted. "I have an idea. It's desperate, but it might work." "I'm listening." "The weapons can't destroy the Devourers, but they can trap them. Lock them in crystallized space. What if we don't try to push them back into the prison? What if we seal them outside it? Create new containment fields using the weapons themselves?" Sarah considered it. That would require operators to maintain the fields constantly, permanently. Someone would have to stay linked to the weapons, existing in dimensional space, forever holding the Devourers in place. "Yes," Dr. Park said quietly. "It would require permanent sacrifice, living anchors, but it's better than letting them escape and consume the cluster." Around Sarah, her team members looked at each other. The weight of what Dr. Park was suggesting settled over them like a shroud. Not just temporary sacrifice, not just transformation, but eternal imprisonment, merged with the weapons, existing forever in the space between dimensions just to hold 4 entities at bay. "How many operators would it take?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "For 4 Devourers? With 2 weapons? Probably 50 per weapon. 100 total. Working in shifts, rotating, maintaining the containment field forever. 100 people, 100 lives, given up completely, transformed into living seals, never to return to the normal world." Sarah looked at her team, saw the fear in their eyes, saw the determination too. "I'll be the first," she said. "If we're doing this, if we're creating permanent anchors, I'll lead by example." "Commander, no," someone protested. "We need you. The other facilities have their own commanders," Sarah interrupted. "And they'll need to make the same choice we're making here. Better they hear it from me. Better they know that I didn't ask anyone to do something I wasn't willing to do myself." She turned to Dr. Park's channel. "Make it happen. Prepare the weapon for permanent interface, and send a message to the other facilities. Tell them what we're doing. Tell them they'll need volunteers, people willing to become the new SEALs." As Dr. Park worked, Sarah transmitted back to Earth, to the command bunker where she'd stood just days ago planning this mission. "This is Commander Sarah Chen," she said. "Andromeda facility is secure, but at a cost. We're implementing Protocol Final Anchor. We need volunteers, people willing to stay here forever, merged with the weapons holding the Devourers at bay. I'm sending the details now. But understand this. The other 6 facilities will need the same thing. Thousands of volunteers, all willing to give up everything. She paused, thinking of the life she'd had before becoming a warden, the family she'd left behind, the dreams she'd abandoned. The progenitors ran from this fight, she continued. They built the prisons and fled the galaxy rather than guard them. Humanity chose differently. We chose to stand and hold the line, and now we're asking the rest of the galaxy to stand with us, not behind us, with us, sharing the burden, sharing the sacrifice, because that's what it means to survive, not as individual species, but as a civilization, together. The message sent. Sarah returned to the weapon platform and placed her hand on the pillar one last time. Prepare permanent interface, she told her team, and someone start taking volunteers for the rotation. We're going to need 99 more anchors, and they need to understand exactly what they're signing up for. As her team began the preparation, Sarah felt the weapon reaching for her mind again. This time she didn't resist. This time she opened herself completely to the transformation. Because someone had to be the anchor, someone had to hold the line, and Sarah Chen had always known deep down that it would be her. The message from Andromeda spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Commander Sarah Chen's transmission, her face already showing the transformation from linking with the progenitor weapon. Her voice, layered with harmonics from other dimensions, became the most viewed recording in galactic history. Within hours, the response began. Admiral Thexnor was the first. He stood on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest watching the recording for the third time and made his decision. I'm going to Andromeda, he announced to his crew. I'm volunteering as a permanent anchor. His officers stared at him in shock. His second-in-command stepped forward, mandibles clicking in confusion. Sir, you're an admiral. The fleet needs you. The Imperium needs you. The galaxy needs anchors more, Thexnor replied. He gestured to the screen showing Sarah's transformed face. Look at her. Look at what she's willing to give up. Humanity has carried this burden for 10,000 years. Now they're asking for help, and I will not let them stand alone. He sent his resignation to Imperial Command, effective immediately. Then he boarded a transport bound for the Andromeda facility. He wasn't alone. 200 members of his crew volunteered to join him. 200 Zarketh, leaving behind their military careers, their families, their futures, to become permanent anchors holding back the void. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On the Valorian homeworld, an entire monastery of quantum monks volunteered. 500 individuals who had spent their lives studying the nature of reality and consciousness. They saw the permanent anchor duty not as sacrifice but as ultimate enlightenment, a chance to exist in dimensions they had only theorized about. The Kretok warriors sent 3 full battle groups. They understood honor, they understood duty, and they understood that holding the line against an eternal enemy was the truest form of both. The silicates, crystalline beings who already existed partially in energy states, found that they adapted to the dimensional interface better than flesh-based species. 10,000 silicates volunteered within the first day. Their collective consciousness could handle the strain of existing in multiple dimensions more easily than individual minds. Even species that had never heard of humanity before the crisis sent volunteers. The Quar, peaceful traders who lived on massive generation ships. The Hive Collective, insectoid beings who thought as a group mind. The Ethereals, energy-based life forms from the galactic core. Within 1 week, over 50,000 beings had volunteered for permanent anchor duty. More than enough for all 7 facilities, but the volunteers needed training. They needed to understand what they were facing, what they were becoming. On Earth, the Warden organization opened its doors for the first time in 10,000 years. The secret bases, the hidden training facilities, the ancient progenitor technology archives. All of it was revealed to the galaxy. Scientists and philosophers and warriors from 1,000 species descended on Sol System to learn from humanity's accumulated knowledge. The training was brutal. Many volunteers washed out, unable to handle even temporary connection to the dimensional weapons. Others went mad during the preparation, their minds breaking under the strain of concepts they weren't meant to comprehend. But enough succeeded. Enough became strong enough, flexible enough, willing enough to become anchors. Admiral Thexnor stood in one of Earth's training facilities, 3 weeks after leaving his flagship. He had changed. His 4 eyes saw in more spectrums now. His mind perceived dimensions that had no name. When he spoke, his voice carried echoes from places beyond normal space. I understand now, he told the human instructor assigned to him.
I understand why your species sacrificed everything.
It's not just duty. It's not just responsibility. When you exist in these dimensions, when you touch the void, you see the truth. You see how fragile reality is, how easily it could all be consumed if the devourers escaped. The instructor, a man who had served as a warden for 40 years, nodded. And now you'll spend eternity holding that knowledge. Existing in the spaces between, forever aware of the danger, forever standing guard. Are you still willing? More than ever, Thexanor replied. He shipped out to Andromeda the next day, one of 1,000 new anchors heading to the 7 facilities. Sarah Chen met him personally when he arrived. Her transformation now complete. She existed more in dimensional space than in normal space now, her form flickering between realities. Admiral, she greeted him. Her voice came from everywhere at once. Thank you for coming, Commander, he replied. Or should I call you something else now? You're not quite human anymore. Sarah smiled, though the expression looked strange on her transformed face. I'm still Sarah Chen, still human where it counts, just existing in more places at once. She gestured to the weapon platform. I'm one of the primary anchors now, permanently linked. 53 others rotate around me, maintaining the containment field on the 4 devourers we sealed. With you and the other new volunteers, we'll have enough to maintain the field forever. Forever is a long time, Thexanor observed. Yes, but someone has to do it. Sarah looked at him directly, and he could see in her eyes the weight of what she had become. You'll still be you, Admiral. You'll remember your life, your choices, everything that made you who you are, but you'll also be more. You'll exist in dimensions that don't have time the way normal space does. Seconds will feel like centuries. Centuries will feel like seconds. You'll perceive things no mortal should perceive, and you'll never be able to go back. I know, Thexanor said. I've made my peace with it. Better this than letting the galaxy fall. Over the next month, all 7 facilities were stabilized. 10,000 permanent anchors took their positions, linking with the progenitor weapons, becoming living seals that held the devourers at bay. They weren't prisoners exactly. They could disconnect briefly, rotate out for rest periods. But they always returned, always maintained the vigil, because the moment the anchors stopped, the moment the containment fields failed, the devourers would escape. And the galaxy would burn. Sarah Chen became the first High Warden, coordinating all 7 facilities from her position in Andromeda. She existed simultaneously in normal space and dimensional space. Her consciousness spread across realities in a way that let her communicate with all the anchors at once. The galactic powers formed a new coalition, the Sentinel Alliance, dedicated to supporting the facilities and training new anchors. Because anchors didn't last forever, the strain eventually broke even the strongest minds. Most lasted 50 years. Some lasted longer, but eventually they all burned out, and new anchors had to take their place. Earth became the heart of the Alliance, not because humanity demanded it, but because every species recognized humanity's sacrifice. For 10,000 years, humans had stood alone in the dark, guarding secrets the galaxy had forgotten. They had earned the right to lead. Admiral Thexanor served as the first non-human High Warden when Sarah eventually burned out after 30 years. He held the position for a century before his own mind finally fragmented from the strain. But before he did, he established the traditions that would guide the Alliance for millennia to come. The Monument to the Lost was built on Earth, a massive structure visible from orbit. It listed every anchor who had ever served, every being who had given up their existence to hold the line. The list grew longer every year, names from 1,000 species all united in sacrifice. Once a year, on what became known as Remembrance Day, the entire galaxy stopped. For 1 hour, every sentient being paused to honor the anchors, to remember that their civilization existed only because 10,000 beings chose to stand in the dark, existing in spaces between spaces, forever holding back the void. And in the 7 facilities, the anchors felt that remembrance. Through their dimensional awareness, they could sense the gratitude of trillions. It didn't make the burden easier. It didn't change what they had given up, but it reminded them why they had made that choice. 500 years after the Andromeda crisis, Sarah Chen still existed, barely. Her consciousness was so transformed, so spread across dimensions that she could barely communicate with normal beings anymore. But once a year on Remembrance Day, she forced herself back into normal space long enough to send a message. It was always the same message. repeated in 1,000 languages, transmitted across the quantum bands that linked the galaxy. We hold the line. We remember why. The galaxy lives because we chose the dark. Do not mourn us. We are content. We are the lock. And the lock is eternal. And the galaxy, all of it, whispered back, "Thank you." In the 7 facilities, in the spaces between dimensions, the anchors maintained their vigil. Humans and Zarketh and Valorians and 100 other species, all merged with the progenitor weapons, all existing partially outside reality to keep the Devourers contained. They could feel the entities pressing against the seals. Eternally hungry, eternally waiting, the Devourers never slept, never stopped. They pushed against the containment fields with patience born from existing outside of time, but the anchors pushed back. Always. Forever. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Never again would any species face the Devourers alone. Never again would the burden of guarding reality fall on only one civilization. The Sentinel Alliance grew to encompass 10,000 species, all contributing resources, knowledge, and anchors to maintain the 7 facilities. New technologies were developed, based on progenitor designs but improved by modern understanding. The containment fields became more efficient. The weapons required fewer anchors to maintain. Rotation schedules improved, giving anchors longer rest periods between shifts. But the basic truth remained unchanged. The Devourers could not be destroyed, only contained. And containment required sacrifice. It required beings willing to exist in dimensions they weren't meant to perceive, holding back horrors that wanted to consume reality itself. Every major civilization in the galaxy began teaching children about the anchors, about the beings who stood in the spaces between, forever watching, forever holding the line. Shrines were built on 1,000 worlds. Prayers were offered in languages that spanned the galactic arm. The anchors became legend. More than legend. They became the foundation of galactic unity. Different species might fight over resources or territory or ideology. But they all agreed on one thing. The anchors must be supported. The facilities must be maintained. The Devourers must never escape. A new culture developed around the facilities themselves. Artists and poets and musicians traveled to them, creating works inspired by the anchor's sacrifice. The facilities became pilgrimage sites, places where ordinary beings could stand in the presence of those who had given up everything. Some anchors welcomed the visitors. Others preferred isolation. But all of them appreciated the recognition, the understanding that their sacrifice meant something, that the galaxy remembered. Thexnor, in his final years before his consciousness fragmented completely, wrote a book about his experiences. It became required reading in every military academy, every leadership school, every place where beings learned about duty and honor. The book's final passage was simple. We came to Earth in conquest and left in shame. Humanity taught us that true strength is not domination, but sacrifice. They stood alone in the dark for 10,000 years, asking for nothing, protecting everyone. I spent a century as an anchor, existing in dimensions that no sane being should perceive, and I would do it again. Because I finally understood what it means to be strong. Not strong enough to conquer. Strong enough to endure. Strong enough to choose the burden that no one else wants to carry. That is humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not weapons. Not technology. The understanding that some things are worth any sacrifice. The book ended with a dedication. To Commander Sarah Chen and all the anchors, human and otherwise, who stand eternal vigil. The galaxy owes you everything. We will never forget. And the galaxy didn't forget. Couldn't forget. Because every single day, in 7 locations across the galactic arm, 10,000 anchors existed in spaces between dimensions. Their consciousness spread across realities, holding back the Devourers. They were the lock. The lock was eternal. And the galaxy lived because they had chosen the dark. In the Andromeda facility, in the deep dimensional spaces where time had no meaning, Sarah Chen existed in her final form. She was barely recognizable as human anymore. Her consciousness was spread so thin across so many dimensions that individual identity had become almost meaningless. But she still remembered. Remembered being human. Remembered making the choice to become the first anchor. Remembered leading by example so others would follow. And once a year, when Remembrance Day came and the galaxy paused to honor the anchors, she felt it, felt the gratitude of trillions, felt the understanding that her sacrifice had meaning. In those moments, existing across dimensions that had no proper names, merged with technology that predated modern civilization, holding back entities that wanted to consume reality itself, Sarah Chen smiled. She had made the right choice. They all had. The progenitors had run, had built their prisons and fled the galaxy in fear. But humanity had stayed, and when the crisis came, when the overconfident Armada broke the seals that held back the galaxy's forgotten doom, humanity had done what the progenitors never could. They had stood their ground. They had paid the price, and they had taught the rest of the galaxy to stand with them. The lock was eternal. The vigil was eternal, and the galaxy, forever grateful, would never again forget the beings who chose to exist in the dark so that everyone else could live in the light. The anchors held the line. They would always hold the line. Because that was what it meant to be strong enough to save the galaxy. Not through conquest, through sacrifice, forever.